What does the video make cinematic and can you pull it off on an action camera? Well, in this video we'll be diving into the settings and some post-production work in order to make your action camera videos look cinematic. And also we'll be climbing up this hill over here for no apparent reason. As I said, for no apparent reason. So let's go. So what does the cinematic look actually look like? Well, there's a couple of things you need to follow in order to get the cinematic videos that, well, you see on TV, because it's been around in cinematography since the beginning of the film era, when they decided that it's going to be 24 frames per second and the shutter speed needs to be the same as our eyes see it. So it's around 1/50th of a second. So those would be your main camera settings, 24 frames per second or 25 in my case, because I live in Europe and our electricity oscillates with 50 Hertz and 25 syncs with 50 and you don't have any flickering lights if you're shooting indoors. So yeah, that's nice. But you also need the correct shutter speed. Now, in order to slow the shutter speed down, you have to have some kind of ND filter like I'm using right over here. As you can see, this is really overblown because I'm shooting with 1/50th of a second shutter speed. Now with action cameras, that's actually a problem because action cameras rely on sharp images in order for the stabilizer to work. So using ND filters and having a very rocky, like dynamic shot, it's just not going to work. Now, but technically speaking, cinematic shots are never going to be dynamic and full of motion. They're always kind of slow panning shots, and for that, of course, you can use an ND filter and slow the shutter speed down to those 1/50th of a second. Okay, so there's a lovely bench right over there, and I have to go, oh yeah, right here. Dude, seriously, I wouldn't want to be here, at night alone. I think it's actually the restroom. But there is one more thing you have to consider when you're shooting with an action camera and want to get cinematic shots. It's the focal length, the wide angle. It's extremely wide. On the Osmo Action, it's around 15mm full frame equivalent, which is just too wide for any cinematic shots. So therefore, we need to tweak things a little bit in post-production, and let's just head back down and do that. So in order to make the action camera look cinematic, we need to change two things. First of all, we need to change the depth of field, because this is really wide. We need to zoom into the shot in order to make it, well, less wide and kind of add a little bit of that fake compression, because that's what cinematic shots actually look like. They're typically recorded with 50mm and above, and this is about 15mm full frame equivalent, which means that it's just not going to look cinematic. And the second thing is adding depth of field into the shot, because these cameras actually have an infinity focus. Basically, they're set to a hyperfocal distance, which I think is around 3 meters away, which means that anything beyond 3 meters and halfway back to the camera, about 1.5 meters away, everything is going to be in focus. This is why action cameras have like an all-in-focus view. Now we need to change this by adding a little bit of fake depth of field. Now the easiest way to do this, and I think you can do this on pretty much any software, so I'm gonna do this in Davinci Resolve. It's called the tilt shift effect, which means that you have a region where things are sharp and in focus and everything else then starts to blur away. Basically, you're mimicking the depth of field, so the focal plane and then the blurring away from the focal plane. Now I think Final Cut and Premiere Pro also have the same tilt shift effect, and that's the easiest way you can actually do it. Now you could use advanced masking and just mask out some of the foreground or background elements in order to make them blurry, but I think that the tilt shift is really fast and it's effective. And just remember, don't go overboard with this effect because it will start to look really fake. So in this shot, as you can see, everything is pretty much in focus. Actually, the flowers are a little bit out of focus because they're too close to the camera, but if I add the tilt shift effect, you can see that now the foreground is blurry and the background is blurry, and I'm focusing somewhere in the middle of the frame. Now, as the camera is moving, I'm also moving the fake focal plane from the background towards the foreground and making those little flowers in the foreground in focus. This really kind of makes it look authentic, although it's fake, and if you watch it a couple of times you will actually see, you know, it doesn't really look that natural, but since it's a very short clip, nobody is going to pay attention as long as you don't really go overboard with this effect. Now you can apply this also to the drone video footage, where you're going to add a little bit more depth into the shot, making them a little bit more cinematic, and of course zooming in and zooming out is going to add those transitions, and it's going to make them a little bit, well, a little bit nicer and a little bit more dynamic and interesting. So those are my hacks for making the action camera footage look cinematic. First of all, record with 1/50th of a second shutter speed and 24 or 25 frames per second, and then zoom in and add the tilt shift effect. This really helps because there is no other way you can make it cinematic. And remember, if you add an ND filter to slow the shutter speed down, you're actually going to be messing with the electronic stabilization of these cameras, because you're adding a blur into the shots, and of course the camera needs sharp images in order to balance them out and make them look smooth. So for fast dynamic shots, this is not going to be a cool thing, but as I said before, cinematic shots are typically slow and kind of laid back, not really fast action style videos. So I hope this helps, I hope this inspires you to try this out on your action cameras, and let me know down in the comments what you get from your results. Also, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hit the like button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.